this will be part 2 of, this will be the second video. Okay, so after the video we just watched, the talk identifies that teachers need to approach ADHD as a difference rather than a deficit, and need to have strategies to allow for hyperactivity, which can be a positive tool in assisting the child's education. So are those with ADHD much different from other children? What do you guys think?
Yes.
In what ways are they different then?
The way that they focus on tasks will be a lot different. They'll either need more help because they can't focus, or the teacher will need to find things that they are already interested in to help them.
What do you think?
I don't know, because there were some students that I've had that told me they were ADHD, but I would never have picked it. So maybe I'm wrong.
There's different levels.
Yeah.
I've written next to it, focus issues, impulsive, and get bored easily.
Yeah.
Which are 3 things that I think sounds like every student.
Yeah. Exactly.
You know what I mean? So, our strategies for engaging students that maybe they can't focus, they have issues with getting involved. We've learned strategies at schools, things like having interesting topics, using videos, using different mediums. He spoke in his presentation that we need to allow for cognitive difference, and we already, I believe, see a trend in that by schools now are more interactive. Classrooms now are more interactive, and we're using different ways of teaching. So we're using smart boards, we're using IT right in front of us, we're speaking with students, we're doing group work. So we're already accounting for that cognitive difference. Some students are better writing, some students are better verbally, and when it comes to ADHD, we need to think about how we might cater using the skills we already have, and what new strategies we can have in place. And I already spoke about it, but which teacher in the story was more desirable?
The progressive teacher.
Yeah, the progressive teacher, the teacher that included him and spoke to him, and the one that he said the qualities he admired in teachers are the ones that would talk to him about the issues that he was facing, and say, how can we fix this together, rather than telling them off that authoritarian kind of style.
You need to change.
Yeah,
the other one seemed to value the fact that he wasn't participating as a trade-up for not being disruptive anymore. Yeah. Which, in my opinion, is just replacing one problem with another different problem.
Yeah, absolutely. You haven't engaged the student in one way, and then you've traded up, and now you're not engaging the student in the other way. So the progressive teacher was like, no, let's actually let's actually address this problem. Absolutely. So on that, I've got 2 pictures here. One has all the things I think the public and I know like 7 News and like Channel 9 and Current Affairs, the way they express ADHD. So across the media, this is what people generally know of ADHD. Hyperactivity, psychiatric, disorder, inattention, healthcare, diagnosis, screening, reliability, disorder, treatment, patience, attention deficit, severity, childhood. A lot of those things there have really negative connotations, the way that we see those. On the other hand, and it's very medical, so either you believe it and you want to fix the problem, and then we have the second image here, and both of these images came up when I researched ADHD, and I'll tell you, this image and images like it were the first of the images, and I had to scroll right the way down before I came across an image like this, which says someone is like highly driven and they've got a lot of things on their mind, and these 2 images sort of, to me, represented the ways that we look at ADHD as a society. We either look at it as something to treat, or we sort of embrace it as someone engaging with a lot of things, and this person might not be adept at all of them, but they're actually trying to engage, they're trying to get educated, they're trying to participate. They just have an issue with how they take information in. So again, what is the public perception of ADHD? In an online psychiatric journal, an article entitled Problems of Overdiagnosis and Overprescribing in ADHD, the article states that trends and patterns in the rise of available stimulants in the United States has created increased public perception of overprescribing medication for ADHD. Basically, in the United States, much like here, there has been a view that people with ADHD are just given Ritalin, given medication. So with that overprescription, or the apparent overprescription, the public ultimately, with what you guys agreed, have come up with this idea that either it doesn't exist or we're just trying to fix problems. The same article suggests that because of severe payer and clinical time constraints, many physicians in America diagnose ADHD in a way that does not allow for an extensive evaluation. So, what does that mean? Public opinion on ADHD as a whole is ill-informed in both Australia, America, and Britain. And confusion on the part of the public feeds the general perception that ADHD is a socially constructed disorder rather than a valid neurobiological disorder. So again, different things within our society are contributing to the fact that a lot of people out there don't actually think ADHD exists, or if they do, they think it's something that's constructed from bad parenting, from diet, and those things contribute to perhaps one or two of the symptoms. But to diagnose a person with ADHD, as you've seen, you need to have, several. I believe it was 6 of the symptoms, 5 in adults and older people and teenagers. So you have to have many of the symptoms. So it does exist, and within Australia, from our research, it shows that ultimately the diagnosis here follows that DSM-5 standard. Again, medication for ADHD. This was touched on in his Tonti's TED talk that we just watched. ADHD can be treated with stimulant medication, and particularly methylphenidate and dexamphetamines are used in Australia. According to the Royal Children's Hospital of Melbourne, stimulant medication is probably the most highly researched of any medication prescribed for children, which is really important to know as teachers, that it's not likely that a student is given medication. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be critical and that we shouldn't think of new ways to engage that student without necessarily using medication. There are many strategies that can use. I've given you guys a handout and we'll go on to the activity. But just other general things that you can think of, like diet, improved diet, exercising. A lot of those general things can be used before medication. However, it's highly researched. So most of the common medication used in Australia is Ritalin, which helps to stimulate parts of the brain involved in self-control, which I already said, allowing ADHD children to focus and filter out unnecessary information. Medication is very specifically calculated based on the doctor's observations and the extent to which the person suffers from ADHD. I will also say DSM-5, the way that they diagnose ADHD, was updated to the fifth edition in 2013. This added basically mild. When a person was diagnosed, they could say the severity of the diagnosis. So that aligns with the fact that medication can be specific. That not all children have severe ADHD and they all need Ritalin. There are levels. Mm-hmm. And teachers will see that in the classroom. Though there is an apparent lack of evidence suggesting what damage medication could have on people suffering from the disorder, especially younger children and teenagers who are still developing in the long term. So this is another area where the public have found reasons to contest the diagnosis of the disorder. And this is what he touched on in his video, or in his talk, that he doesn't believe that anyone should be having medication at such a young age, because we don't know enough about it. And I believe that there are many ways that you can engage ADHD students without the use of medication. It's not necessarily necessary. It really depends on the student. So inclusivity, to bring it back to the topic after all, why is all this relevant? So teachers need to be aware about public perception of ADHD in order to create inclusive, educative environments. Students need to understand that ADHD is a disorder and that their classmate is not always acting out for no reason. Do you guys have had an experience where perhaps there was a person that maybe you suspected was ADHD or you knew it was ADHD in the classroom, and how did the students react to that person?
My year 10 class, we had a
Yeah.
year 10 boy. He used to walk around and put his fingers all over people's devices and
Yeah.
TVs, and my mentor teacher was very relaxed towards
Like
him.
forgiving
yeah,
of that
forgiving,
behaviour?
and the students really resented him for getting away with behaviours that they wouldn't be able to get away with.
Yeah. I will say that in my research, I found that as far as the social aspect, that there is limited ways of engaging ADHD students or helping them socially. So that's still an area. So as a teacher, it's really up to the person in charge to be able to see, like, by allowing particular behaviours, am I actually ostracising this student from the rest of the class? Perhaps there was a more productive way of dealing with the ADHD. Maybe rather than going around the room, putting his fingers all over things, maybe he had like a stress ball or something that when he felt fidgety. But it's about thinking on your feet, and you're trying to include this person in the classroom without having other classmates get angry or annoyed at this person, without understanding ADHD, that this person has ADHD and what that actually means. And that's about tolerance in the classroom, and it's tolerance from part of the teacher, and it's tolerance on part of the class.
So would you tell the students? Sorry, like.
Would you tell the students whether the person has ADHD? I think that's probably personal.
Then how would they
How would you deal?
How would they become tolerant if they didn't know, or how would they?
Well,
you said that they understand, but.
Well, I mean, overall, if, like, for instance, you could do a lesson on ADHD. It can be taught within health classes, and also just general difference. Like I said, public perception is that ADHD is socially constructed, or majority of public opinion is that. So if we can start changing it, start talking about it in schools, then if there's a student in the classroom that's just really disruptive and they start recognising the behaviour, perhaps we can look at changing the way it's viewed, and then the tolerance begins there. But ultimately, it's a much bigger question than what specifically one teacher can do in their classroom. But I would assume that would just be you people thinking on your feet. So teachers should also know why medication. Again, why I spoke about medication and public perception. Medication is used, and that is not the only thing that can be done. A teacher who does not know what they can do to assist ADHD students may encourage parents to seek medication for their child. Is that ethical? What do you think? Is it ethical for a teacher to speak to a parent about seeking medication?
Probably they should, before going straight to being medicated, they should be looked at by a professional.
Yeah.
It's not really a teacher's place to say they should be medicated. It would be a teacher's place to say, no, you should go to a doctor and just get these symptoms looked at, and from there they could look at medicating them. But yeah, definitely not the teacher's role to suggest medication outright.
What do you think?
Yeah, same.
Same. Yeah, I 100% agree. There's a boundary, and the fact that teachers can't diagnose students. So don't diagnose students. If you can see things in a classroom and allow for those things, change your teaching style. That's different from saying that boxing someone as ADHD who might not necessarily be ADHD and saying we need medication for this person. They need to be fixed. That's the line of thinking that the speaker Tonti, his friend, suffered from, and why he seems so troubled. So As teachers, we are obligated to care for our students and provide safe learning environments. Knowing about public perception and medication is necessary in order to encourage a more positive outlook on ADHD that may not be shared by the child's classmates, parents, or indeed other teachers at the school. So we're a new generation, you know, and some of the teachers at the school probably also think that ADHD is socially constructed or ill-informed. So when you enter your classroom, I think just keep an open mind. I'll just ask how much time I at.
15 minutes on part 2.
Okay, so did I? Okay, so then I just had a picture of someone with ADHD. Okay, so we're about 45 minutes now. So the activity, which isn't a long one, I will get to the slide. I've already given you guys your activity with, a sheet of paper which has a few strategies on it. And just looking over those, there are more strategies after this, so I'll just say that right now. But we're going to look at the conditions of ADHD, how someone's diagnosed, and just either using the paper in front of you or off the top of your head, what are strategies that you could use or you could do in a classroom to address that specific symptom. So again, a student with ADHD is going to be diagnosed with 6 or at least 5 of those symptoms. So we need to think of the different ways that we could address each individual part, and maybe together that will have an overall strategy of how that student can be included in a classroom. If you want to specifically talk about your subject areas that you teach in, I know English and humanities for both of you, so science and math area for you. So here are the symptoms. So just on the first one, fails to give close attention to detail or makes careless mistakes. What might you think you could do? You can have like a bit of time to think over each one of these, or maybe it'll just work on the first one. If you can't think of it, maybe there's one of them on the page that you can.
Well, probably with the making careless mistakes, you could just, if they're doing work in their books and they're inclined to making mistakes with writing, you could encourage them to read it out loud, quietly to themselves, not like so it's disrupting the classroom, but reading it out loud so that they can pick up their mistakes, so they're not, if they're just reading it in their head. Yeah,
it's about the way that the child does things, and perhaps you might think about the fact that we go to students and we say, you have to write this down, and they make mistakes or they're right. Perhaps one of the things that it says that we can do is perhaps the child chooses the way that they present their information. They're making careless mistakes. Possibly it's because you're wanting them to present in a particular way that just doesn't agree with them, and they really struggle. For younger students, it might be rather than write a story, it might be do a comic book for English area, and that would work even up to 7, 8, maybe even 9. So finding different ways of presenting the information, and also hopefully it's something that they enjoy, so that they can maybe that hyperactivity that we learned about, being able to hyper focus. If it's something they enjoy, maybe they can get into it, and they will spend more time looking at the detail. So has difficulty sustaining attention.
Chunking lessons. So
chunking the lessons, absolutely. That's one of the again on the other page when I flip over. Chunking lessons, really important. Breaking things apart into small chunks so that a student's not focusing on one thing for too long, because they will lose attention. And you know what? Most students will do that anyway. Most students will lose attention. So in your lessons, try breaking up with activities, maybe a video, and then also you're accounting for the different types of learning styles if you're doing that as well. So you're resonating with different children in different ways, and also helping to sustain the ADHD child in the class. So it does not appear to listen. Unsure? What do you think? All of these, it's not as straight a cut as there is an absolute answer. It's just thinking on your feet. If a child doesn't appear that they're listening, what would they do?
What would I do?
Yeah, what would you do?
Mm. I don't know how to verbalise it. Try to employ, visual.
Well, if you were reading off a PowerPoint or reading from a textbook, get them to read it out instead. So that instead of listening, they're actually verbalising it themselves.
Yeah, okay, that's a good idea. So incorporating them into the lesson. Or maybe, it could be simply the way you're speaking. If you're speaking monotoned, maybe vocalise and change the loudness, or maybe, you just need to find different ways of drawing students' attention immediately. Also, if they don't appear to be listening, maybe they're not listening.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe bring them closer to the teacher so that they're right there and that they're able to focus. Evidence shows that ADHD students actually perform quite well with one-on-one. So in a classroom of 30 kids, the best way to maybe simulate one-on-one is to have them right in front of the teacher, so that when directions are being given, it can be out to the class and then to the ADHD student. Perhaps. Maybe next to another student that can help. But that would be a way of doing it.
I feel like I'm overthinking this a little bit.
Sorry?
I feel like I'm overthinking this.
I think you are.
Yeah.
Perhaps overthinking. A lot of these strategies just work for kids.
Yeah.
But the point is, several of these symptoms will be in an ADHD child or a student, right? However, a lot of kids are going to have these.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll go through. So he has difficulty with organisation. What do you think? Difficulty with organisation. First of all, I think kids have difficulty with organisation. So, can you think of anything? How would you help a kid that's not organised in the classroom? Any idea?
You'd be organised for them, so you'd have the spare pens, the spare stationery to help them out, because you know that they're gonna not bring stuff to class.
Other ways, and what they said is maybe a checklist. If a student either can't focus, they're not, so the one above it was struggles to follow through on instructions, maybe a checklist with instructions. When you write out things on the board, have 1, 2, 3, and this is specifically what I want you to do, rather than read the book and tell me what you think on this. You're specifically writing out, read paragraph here to here, do this, do that. So just breaking it down a little bit more. I know time-wise, we're probably getting close to it. Sorry?
What time do you want?
You've got probably 8 minutes left.
About 8 minutes, okay. So I'll just go down to has difficulty remaining seated. What might you do?
Get them to walk around for 5 minutes, every 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Not 5 minutes, for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting students out of their seat. For instance, in test examples, the research has shown that you need to perhaps give ADHD off the clock time.
Yeah.
So that they're sitting down for ages. They're going to get fidgety, which is another one of those things on there. Possibly they'll get fidgety, and you give them that chance to get up, walk around, kind of lose some of that energy and hyperactivity that they've got, so that they can refocus. It could be something else. You maybe have a ball that they squish, or a place that they walk back and to from. If they're getting out of their seat, so that they can regain their concentration in a way that doesn't disrupt the class. So talk successively might be a hard one to do. How might you address talk successively?
Get them involved in discussion.
Yeah.
It'll be fine if they're talking, but
if it's in discussion, it's good. And if it's valuable contribution, that would be good. I think this one's a difficult one because, you're kind of partially cutting off. But something to be clear on is there are class rules.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can't talk over students. You can't do that. So, and it says interrupts and intrudes upon other students in what they're doing. Sorry?
Just a quick, how would you address difficulty waiting or taking turns? How would you do?
Waiting or taking turns. So there is, and I'll show you in the next slide. Actually, we'll move on to the next slide. I'll get back to that and I'll tell you when I'm addressing it, because I know I'm going to be short for time. So again, that was the DSM-5. Case studies. So there's been a range of studies, different ways of intervention. I don't know if I specifically have it here, but so I will answer your question. What was it? If they have difficulty waiting for their turn. Yeah. One of the methods that they said to use is to maybe have a like scale, a like-it scale. So when a student exhibits a behaviour, you know, they have maybe a poor lesson, you say, how did you perform in this lesson? You know what I mean? And they might give themselves, you know, 10 out of 10, and then you give them a 4 out of 10, and then after dealing with them, they'll start to recognise the negative qualities that they're showing, so talking over students, and you'll tell them throughout the lesson. And then soon enough, they will be pretty much matched where you are, because they'll gauge what they're doing wrong. So that's a strategy that they've used, because you're actually promoting like autonomous learning and independence, recognizing when they're doing something. So that's a long game, but you know, that's just the way it is. It's about allowing the student to recognize when they're doing something wrong and that they shouldn't be doing it. And you just need to reassert class rules. That's what I would do. That's what a lot of the literature talks about. It is it's a lot of trial and error, and a lot of these strategies are going to be just trial and error. So like you said, chunking and scaffolding are really important to break lessons down to help focus. Giving students choices within assignments allows students to retain focus, because maybe they prefer to do assignments in different ways. Sequencing their assignment in a way that best suits them. So that would be really important, allowing them to do it their own way. They won't miss things if maybe they can come up with the order of how they want to present. So one of the most common behavioural intervention of ADHD, at least in the research literature, is the use of contingent positive reinforcement in the form of teacher praise or token reinforcement. When a child shows a specific behaviour desired by a teacher, they receive a token that can be cashed in for a reward. So again, using extrinsic motivation seems to be a lot of the key with ADHD, but the strategy I gave you before was more about intrinsic. So using both, but really reinforcing positive ways. According to the research, ADHD students respond really well with praise and having been given that one-on-one attention and said, you are doing really well this lesson because of this characteristics. And they will, you know, like any student, like strive to be better and to please their teacher. And this is what I was saying about the like-it scale. That's what this is about. So it was a meta-analysis. Teachers ask ADHD students to assess their own behaviour so that they begin to self-regulate themselves and realise when they're exhibiting inappropriate behaviour. That's what the like-it scale is about. Rating yourself, how good you were that lesson. Also, other methods include, you know, using ICT or different skills in the classroom. Maybe it particularly benefits that student. I don't think that's something that specifically benefits ADHD. I think it benefits all children to try different methods and, you know, what works well for your class. You know, beyond that, like I said, social intervention. This was a hard one. If there are students in the class that don't, you know, particularly like that student because of the ADHD characteristics they're showing, there is no, as far as the literature goes, there is no clear method of how to integrate ADHD into the classroom socially, because it's different for each individual student. So it's really up to the teacher to say, in what ways can we make sure that the ADHD doesn't ostracize the student and is actually to their benefit. And I'd like to say that the fact sheet that I gave you was taken nearly directly from helpguide.org. I don't mean it as copyright infringement or anything. It's information for teachers on how they can best improve their practice and some strategies. It's just really clear dot point information, and that's why I gave it out as an activity for you guys to look at. Hopefully it helps, though much of my research and my presentation has been obviously original in its delivery, but the activity sheet isn't. So I wanted to say that in the presentation so it's clear. And in summary, I know it's been long, difference, not deficit. There's a difference in cognition. We need to think of ADHD students as different. but not lacking. Medication may be needed, but it isn't necessarily needed, and teachers need to be aware of the strategies that they can use to make sure that, you know, a student isn't actually dumb on medication, because that can happen where, you know, it's not needed necessarily. The public is ill-informed, so teachers should make sure that the public, or that at least the classmates are knowledgeable of the concept of ADHD, especially if there's a student in the class with ADHD. Teachers can do a lot. There are a lot of strategies, there are a lot of things teachers can do for inclusive learning. And finally, many strategies that help ADHD will assist those without ADHD. Chunking, scaffolding, different ways of teaching, they all help. So overall, I hope that was beneficial. I hope it spoke to you about how to inclusively, assist with ADHD education within a classroom context. Thank you.
Well done, Joshie.